welcome to the Ignite Your Leadership Prowess Podcast. Today is another beautiful day with another really wonderful guest, Tressa Beheim. Tressa is from the Simplify Now. I'm going to give Tressa the honor to introduce herself and tell us all the amazing things she's been doing, helping female leaders to accelerate their profession and just get on doing great things that they know how to do. Tressa, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. You're really welcome, and I am highly, highly privileged to have you here. Can you please tell us who you are, what you do, and the amazing things you've been doing so far?
Of course. Thank you so much for having me today. So I'm Tressa, and I run Simplify Now. We are a boutique agency that focuses primarily on working with female entrepreneurs who have some sort of an online business. And we really love working with clients who, we all want to make money in our businesses. That's the purpose, but they have something else that drives them, a passion, something they want to make an impact in. And we help them kind of take care of all the things behind the scenes so that they can really step into their own zone of genius, their own sort of leadership, and show up in the way that they want to show up. And I've been doing it for about 12 years, which, in internet world is a really long time. This version of my business started when I moved to Germany about 7 years ago.
Oh, that is so fantastic. That is so fantastic. So I'm going to delve into what we're going to be talking about, because I know you're passionate about how leaders, entrepreneurs, people who want to thrive in the things they are really in love with, how they can actually, make this start, and not just make the start, thrive, survive in what they're doing through delegation. I know you're passionate about telling people the best ways to delegate, but I'd like you to shed some light on that. How did you use that to propel what you do currently?
So I'm what's called an online business manager, which often means that I come into a business that is a little on the smaller side. Typically, the business owner is trying to get to the next level in some way. That could mean that they're trying to break 6 figures. That could mean that they're trying to break 7 figures. It could just mean that they're trying to change their schedule, and instead of working 60 hours a week, they want to work 30 hours a week. But there's something in their business that isn't quite working the way that they want it to work, typically when they bring someone like me on. And what we really focus on is, what are the things that are holding you back, right? What are the things in your business that aren't working the way that you want them to work right now so that you can thrive? And over the years, working with all these different clients, one of the main things that shows up again and again and again is how to delegate. People often think that delegating means giving someone a task, and that's all there is to it. But there's actually so much more involved with delegating in an effective way, and delegating so that you as the business owner, you as the leader, are able to actually thrive in your own role and not spend all of your time worrying about the tasks that you've delegated. And so there's just so much that goes into it, both professionally and personally. And if you're an entrepreneur from a business standpoint, there's just so much involved. And I think people often think that it's way simpler than it actually is.
That is so fantastic. And I'm really waiting to hear everything you have to say about delegation, because I really do resonate with that. As somebody who's worked in corporate organizations for many, many years, I understand working with team members. As someone who has my business, I've got 2 businesses thriving really well. And I understand having to work operations in my business, a huge number of team members, and having that problem, saying to myself, it's sucking my time doing other things, yet I have team members, I don't even know how to utilize them very well to free my time, so I can resonate. And I know that some of my audience, some of our listeners are wondering, oh, I work as a team leader, or I'm a senior manager and I've got a number of teams. So I know that the art of delegation actually applies to whether you're a business owner, you're a team leader, you're a senior leader, whoever, it is something that is really, really crucial if you must make that next step, if you must give yourself that freedom that you need, leverage the time you have and all of those things. So what are the best principles around delegating?
So I think there's a few key things that we want to remember when it comes to delegation. We often get very caught up in the task, right? I've got this task, this thing that I need done. And so I'm going to give somebody that task. And we get very caught up in delegating an individual item. And we sort of forget to take a couple of steps back and set our team up for success, whoever it is that we're delegating to, whether it's, someone in your business, whether it's someone that you are leading in the corporate world. You have to set them up for success before you ever assign them the first task. And so one of the most important things to think about is, have you actually given them the permission to do their job, to do their role? We very often don't realize the way that we are holding our team back by not giving them permission and not empowering them to make decisions. And so making sure that they understand sort of what are their parameters, what are their guide rails, how, whatever word you want to use, but what can they do on their own? How empowered are they to make decisions? That's absolutely critical when it comes to delegating, because so much of delegating comes down to making decisions, right? And understanding that they are going to have a task that they have to complete. But as they complete that task, they're going to have to think about questions, and things are going to come up that you didn't anticipate. And if you've given them the permission to make those decisions on their own, they're going to be so much more effective than if you just focus on, schedule this blog post, right? Or, respond to this email. They need more than just the task itself.
Okay, so how do, leaders, entrepreneurs, how do we then empower people we are delegating to effectively? What are the things we can put in place to make the delegation more effective?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that is really powerful is understanding that there's a difference between the way you would do something and what is correct, right? We often, when we're delegating tasks, we may still have sort of a perception in our head of how the task is going to look at the end. And so I struggle with this all the time when I assign things to my team. I will look at it and I will have to remind myself that the way I would do the task is not necessarily the only way to do the task correctly. And so really coming at it from a perspective of evaluating the task for its correctness has to be separated from how you would do it. And so that way, when you're speaking with your team, you're really not undermining the way that they've chosen to complete something by saying, well, I would have done it this way, or you should have thought about this, right? Really looking at it from, did they complete the task correctly, even if it's not how I would do it? So I think that's one really important factor. And then the other another really important factor is to think about, can you give them any, rules or guidelines, things that can help them feel more confident in what they're doing? And so I always like to use an example when it comes to like buying something within someone's business, right? So my team members are empowered to buy something that will make their job easier. If it will save them more than 2 or 3 hours of work, they are allowed to make that decision on their own without asking me, if it is under a certain dollar amount. And so in my business, that dollar amount is $50. So if they can make a decision on their own to purchase something that's going to make their job easier and it's less than $50, you don't have to ask, just do it, get it done. I'm happy to let you make that decision. If you're going to need a tool that's going to cost $50 per month or $500 per month, right, then you absolutely have to ask. And so giving them some scenarios of, this is when, you absolutely can make this decision on your own. I fully trust you, you're empowered. And these are the things that, you want to get some input on before you move forward. So giving them some guidance on, what is, I don't want to use the word, I don't want to say appropriate, but, what are they empowered to do, really? It helps them feel that they actually own their role and they own the tasks that they're doing, and they're not just checking things off of a box.
Oh, that is really fantastic, because I noticed there's a lot of trust there at that point. And I know that trust is one of the problems that some leaders, some entrepreneurs, some managers face, because they believe, as you said, in our minds, in our heads, something's going to say, oh, I know how to do it. I know what I want. I know how it should turn out. And for that reason, we don't fully trust other people sometimes. So where does that trust come from? I mean, for you to be able to say, okay, I have set this aside. I trust you. You can make these decisions and you can make them right. So you spend this amount. So there is a lot of trust there. Where does that come from? How can leaders build more trust with the people they're managing, people they're delegating to, on them?
Absolutely. I agree. I think that trust is absolutely essential when it comes to delegating. And in my experience, I think really trust is built over time, and it comes from giving your direct reports more and more responsibility as they show they can handle it. And really, it's almost like the way we build self-trust in our own selves, right? When we're trying to build trust within ourselves, we look for evidence and we look for, I've done what I said I was going to do, all of these times. And it's the same with our teams. If we can go back and look, and, as humans, we have a tendency to focus on the negatives. And so it is much easier to look at the one time they made a mistake. But if you can really focus on, out of 100 tasks, out of 100 requests, how many have they, done on time, the way that I intended them to be done? They showed that they cared, they showed that they showed up, right? And really focus on building that, trust that they are going to do the task. And obviously that means they have to hold up their end of the bargain, but you do have to make sure that you're acknowledging that trust in them when you're thinking about them, because like I said, it is easy to focus on the negative, and it's easy to overlook all of the trust that they're building up with you. And then I think really looking at, really thinking about when they have succeeded, how did you help them succeed and how did they succeed on their own? And then evaluating, how can we create that situation more and more? And that just continues to build the trust in the relationship.
Oh, that's so powerful. That's really lovely, because I'm thinking, as you've said, the more you can build the trust, the more you can empower your team members, the more you can grow the team.
Yeah, for sure.
And, and that sort of thing. And as you have said, as you said already, you trust, you have that level of, I don't want to use the word again, appropriateness. Let's say that, that level of what is appropriate for them to begin to make decisions on, and then you have given them, that, and they can do their role knowing that we can make XYZ amount of decision on our own and then tender, the end result as it is expected of us. Okay, so at what point, what level can, or what threshold can we begin to build, to get to that point where you can say to your team members, I give you that level of appropriateness to make some certain decisions on your own. You don't have to come back to me. What must be happening within the team? How do we build that team to give that level of, trust for them to be able to do things on their own without supervision, so to say?
So I think part of it depends on the role, right? Because obviously, depending on what role someone is in, it's going to vary dramatically. If I hire someone for a very entry-level position, it's going to take a lot more before I may have more confidence in them, because they might not have a proven track record in what they've been doing, right, in other ways, versus someone who's maybe coming in a little bit more senior role. But generally speaking, I like to always start with the assumption that people are good at what they do, right? I like to always start with the assumption when someone joins my team that they are going to do what they say they're going to do. They're going to show up and they're going to do a good job, until I'm proven otherwise, right? And so as they start to complete things, I really like to evaluate any hiccups that come along. I really try to take the time to evaluate, was that my mistake when I assigned the task? Did I perhaps not give them all the information that they needed? Did I not give them all the resources that they needed? Was this their mistake and they just didn't quite understand, versus they just did not complete the task, or they did not show up in the way that I want them to in my business, right? And so really trying to get to the heart of the matter as quickly as possible when there is a disconnect. What is the cause of that disconnect? Because it's a very different situation if somebody, is new to you, new to your leadership, and they're struggling, if it's something that you're perhaps contributing to by how you're leading them, or how you're giving them work. That's a very different situation versus somebody who just kind of doesn't care and isn't really showing up the way that we need them to. And I'm going to obviously deal with those in very different ways. And so really taking the time to look at what's actually happening here before jumping to conclusions, which is very challenging when you're busy and you've got a lot of people reporting to you and you're trying to accomplish a lot. It's really super tempting to just be like, oh, this person isn't doing a good job. I don't want them anymore. I don't want them on my team anymore. But sometimes when you look at it, you're like, oh, this person is actually really good at their job. They just need me to maybe assign something in a slightly different way. Or they need me to, ask them if they have any questions instead of expecting them to come to me with questions. And so just learning those things as you're building a relationship with a direct report can really make all the difference in how they show up and do their job.
Oh, lovely. Fantastic. That's really good. And there was something you touched on that, really reminded me, because I know as entrepreneurs, as the people at the top, as leaders, people want to make things a lot easier for themselves, and the tendency to delegate more to people you trust, people who have this proven track record, as you said. The tendency is really high because they've worked with you, you've worked with them, the quality of their work and that sort of thing. So the tendency to want to delegate more to them, is really high. And I know that in the art of delegation, we are both trying to achieve a common goal, largely. So how can the person delegating, the manager, the leader, the entrepreneur, how can they be a partner in ensuring or in working with their direct report, their team members, to get that track record, that proven track record that's going to help them, get more work to be delegated to them, or accelerate their career, or just help them jumpstart their, their career, that sort of thing. How can both of them work as a team together to achieve that for the, the direct report, the team member? How can leaders do that really?
Yeah, so I think it often really comes down to communication. Both sides have to be willing and able to communicate accurately and completely, because as a leader, when you have a lot of different people reporting to you, you're not always completely aware of how full someone's plate is, right? So you may not immediately know that someone is approaching their capacity. And so in that instance, they really have to speak up and say, hey, I'm a little bit overwhelmed right now. Like, I feel like I'm getting a little too much to do, so that you can step up as the leader and help them, deal with that. And then obviously, as a leader, you're always wanting to keep an eye out for signs that people on your team are overwhelmed. But if you have a two-way street of communication where they can come to you and they can say, this is going really well, I'm struggling over here, this is, kind of hit or miss, right? You can really help them show up even better for you. And then I think the other thing that is, I think, really important is thinking about, have I given them too much too soon, too many different things all at once, right? We work with a lot of different clients in my business. And so we generally have anywhere between 15 and 20 accounts that we're working on at any given time. So when a new person comes in, it can be really tempting to just be like, okay, here's 15 clients, like, figure it out, right? Because we're super busy and we need people to help us with all the different accounts. But what we've realized is that that is incredibly overwhelming. And so we're much better off helping people acclimate by giving them maybe, say, 3 clients at first, and then slowly introducing the rest of the accounts, because by doing that, we're helping to control the information that they have to absorb, and we're allowing them to show up better, right? And so at the end of the day, it may take a little bit longer to get them up to speed on all the different accounts, but we're going to be much more effective together by doing it that way, because we're taking into consideration, you can't just throw somebody to the wolves and expect them to thrive, generally speaking.
Oh, that is fantastic. So that is really great. Three key things that managers can really do, that leaders can do to help their subordinates, to help their team members to get right into the system, and doing their work effectively. So breaking it down, giving them little to work with to help them acclimatize with the system, to actually, get into the ecosystem of the company, the organization, to understand how things work. And then communication, yes, was a big one that you talked about. And I guess in the art of delegation and mostly the things that we do, I think effective communication and the two-way street communication, where someone is speaking and there is a listening, the other person is listening, I think that will really do the good, that we intend to achieve, when we are collaborating or when we're working with other people. And the third thing that I got from there is that be considerate, because people get information and we cannot all process information the same way. So be considerate about how you just dish information onto people and then just add stuff to them, because it can be overwhelming for others. And that is really great. That is fantastic. So I would like you to touch on, one key thing that leaders can do to actually make the art of delegation not as, because some people find it as a task for them as leaders. What can they do to simplify the process of delegation for themselves? Not to see it as a task in terms of, how to make the decision, who am I choosing, just to simplify the art from start to finish. How do they do that?
I would probably say the number one tip would be to really focus on the outcome, right? Don't focus on the individual task. Don't focus on today or tomorrow. Focus on the outcome that you are trying to accomplish with your direct report. And depending on their role, depending on how they, work for you and your team and your business, that outcome is going to be very different. But if you have a really clear understanding of the outcome that you want with this team member, with this relationship, you can figure out the ways to delegate to them that will help get you to that outcome and that will help them thrive as you're working towards whatever that outcome is.
Okay. So, and largely, because I know, so what is the difference between delegating and micromanaging?
So I think it's an interesting nuance that can be easy to forget. And I sometimes forget myself, right? When we're truly delegating a task, we're assigning it to someone and we're assigning that outcome and we're giving the task over to them pretty much completely. We're not expecting to come back and double or triple check it. We're not going to look at it and, make sure they did every step correctly. We're really handing it over to them to complete. And of course, they're going to have some SOPs. They're going to have some guidance on how they should complete the task. But if we're truly delegating, we are handing it to them and kind of giving up our responsibility for that task or for that outcome. Whereas if we're assigning tasks or if we're micromanaging, we're still very much knee deep in everything that we're asking them to do. And we may be checking in at every single step. We may be looking at, did you do it this way? Or did you check this box? Or did you, remember to use this the way that I asked you to? And so you're still very much involved in how the task is going to be completed or how the project is going to be completed. And it's still very much in your mental bandwidth, right? When we truly delegate something, we're kind of taking it out of our mental to-do list and giving it to someone else versus micromanaging. We're giving them the work, but we're still holding on to the mental checklist, the mental bandwidth of whatever it is. And so we have to keep checking up on it, right? And I think when you're able to truly delegate something, you hand it over, you give some check-in points, here's when I need you to check back with me. And then when you have the final product, I'll review it and we'll, go from there. It's a much simpler way of completing the task versus the micromanaging where you may be kind of checking in at multiple touch points.
Okay. Before we round, really round up, there is something you talked about, your mental bandwidth, thinking it within yourself that, okay, I've delegated, but you have not let go. So what are the practicalities? What can leaders, people who say, oh, I really want to delegate, I really want to let them do it, but it's just that, making excuses, not making them to delegate well. What can they do for themselves to actually let go? Because you said when you're delegating, you're actually delegating practically, physically, and sometimes mentally. You're just letting go, trusting them, trusting your gut. How can leaders perfect that art of delegating and completely letting go?
I think really coming up with a system for yourself and for your team to close those loops when you have delegated something. So making sure that your team knows when they've done something, this is how I need to kind of report back, so to speak, right? So again, it's not the same as micromanaging. It's sort of coming back and saying, okay, that thing you gave me, it's been delivered, it's been completed, or it's ready for final review. So they're really coming back to you to tell you what your next step is. I think that's a critical piece of it. And then having some sort of tool or software or system to manage all of the different things in different formats, so that you can, if you ever need to, if there's an open task that I've delegated and I need to check on it for whatever reason, let's say, your leader has asked you for feedback on it, there is a standard system that everybody follows, so that at any given moment, you could very quickly go back and say, okay, I don't need to reach out to the team member and wait for them to get back to me. Because we have this system in place, I can quickly go and figure out what the status is just by looking at, whatever your system is. And then I can carry on with my day, right? Because being able to know and have that security that at any moment I could, if I need to, really alleviates the need to do it.
That is fantastic. That is, well said, very well explained. Okay, I'd like you to talk to us, briefly about how you help organizations and entrepreneurs, how they can find you, help them with delegating, delegation, and, working smarter and more effectively.
Absolutely. So my website is just my name, tressabeheim.com. And we, like I said, work with female entrepreneurs. And we are a marketing and operations agency. So we generally help with all of the back end items that are required with running an online business, whether you're a coach, an author, a speaker, whether you do podcasts, right? Anything that would kind of need sort of project management, operations, and the role that I play, which I just absolutely love, is that strategic partner, making sure that business owners don't feel so alone, because being a leader, running a business, it can be very lonely, and you can feel like you have the weight of the world on your shoulders. And so I really love showing up for women who are running a business and being sort of the other adult in the room, so to speak, and to really just help them not feel so alone in whatever great thing that they're trying to accomplish.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Tressa. Lovely, beautiful. This is where we are going to be ending the Ignite Your Leadership Prowess podcast for today. And until I see you again, just keep being the best of who you are.